What happens when a shy cashier, struggling to find his voice, faces cruelty from customers only to have an unexpected champion step in? Will this life-changing moment be enough to alter his future forever? Before we dive into this uplifting journey, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. Paper or plastic? Charlie's voice trembled as he asked the question, his words halting mid-sentence. The customer, a middle-aged man in a business suit, rolled his eyes and sighed loudly. "Spit it out, kid." "I don't have all day," the man snapped. Charlie's face flushed as he repeated the question, his stutter more pronounced under the weight of the impatient glare. The man shook his head, muttered something under his breath, and snatched the plastic bag Charlie was fumbling to hand over. As the customer stormed off, Charlie caught the tail end of his words, dripping with disdain. Why do they hire people who can't even talk? It wasn't the first time Charlie had heard something like that, but it never hurt any less. As the next customer approached, he forced a small smile and muttered a quick H-hi before scanning the items on the conveyor belt. His hands moved quickly, almost mechanically, bagging groceries with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times. The supermarket bustled with life, the aisles packed with shoppers weaving through shelves stacked high with goods. Children cried, carts squeaked, and the steady beep of registers provided a constant rhythm. Amid all the chaos, Charlie stood at his station, a figure often unnoticed, except when someone decided to make him the target of their frustrations. "Keep up the pace," Charlie barked his supervisor, Greg, from across the room. Greg was a stocky man with a perpetual scowl, the kind of boss who found fault in everything but himself. "We're getting slammed out here." Charlie nodded quickly, keeping his eyes downcast. He knew better than to argue, even though he was already moving as fast as he could. The end of his shift couldn't come soon enough. The moment the clock struck 5, Charlie slipped off his apron, grabbed his worn messenger bag, and headed for the staff exit. He didn't bother saying goodbye to anyone. Most of them wouldn't notice, and the rest wouldn't care. His tiny studio apartment wasn't much to look at: a thrift store couch, a second-hand coffee table, and a small kitchenette that barely fit the basics, but it was his sanctuary. He collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling, the day's insults playing on a loop in his mind. His phone buzzed on the table. It was his mom. "Hey, sweetie," her warm voice filled the room. "How was your day?" Fine, Mom," Charlie replied, though the crack in his voice betrayed him. "Don't let them get to you," she said gently. "Remember, you're worth so much more than their opinions." Her words were comforting, but Charlie couldn't shake the weight on his chest. After a few minutes of chatting, he promised to visit her soon and hung up. The silence in the apartment felt heavier now. As the evening wore on, Charlie sat at his small desk, a notepad in front of him filled with scribbles and crossed-out lines. He was trying to practice speaking, just as his speech therapist had taught him years ago. "P paper or P plastic," he repeated softly, the words coming out unevenly. The sound of his own voice frustrated him, and he slammed the pen down. Yet, a flicker of determination remained. Tomorrow was another day, and maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't be so bad. The faint glow of the city lights filtered through the blinds as Charlie settled into bed. He stared at the ceiling until his eyes grew heavy, not knowing that the next day would change everything. The morning rush was in full swing when Charlie arrived at the supermarket, apron in hand. He'd learned to keep his head down and move quickly through the throngs of employees and customers, trying to make himself as invisible as possible. Today, though, there was an unusual energy in the air. Whispers buzzed among the staff, and even Greg looked less sour than usual. "Did you hear who's coming in today, Clara?" one of the cashiers said to the bagger as Charlie took his position at register 4. The bagger shrugged, disinterested. "Some celebrity, right?" "Not just some celebrity," Clara said, her voice hushed but brimming with excitement. "Tom Hanks. Can you believe it? The Tom Hanks, right here in our store. I heard he's filming something nearby." Charlie stiffened. Tom Hanks. Even Charlie, who spent most of his free time reading or practicing his speech exercises, knew who that was. The mere thought of encountering someone so famous made his palms sweat. "Don't screw it up," Charlie Gregg barked, snapping him out of his thoughts. "We don't need you embarrassing us in front of someone like that." The words stung. but Charlie nodded silently. He focused on scanning items and avoiding eye contact with customers, hoping that the alleged visit was just a rumor. The line at Charlie's register grew longer as the lunch hour approached. He was handling the flow reasonably well until a loud, brash voice interrupted his rhythm. "Seriously? This is the line I get stuck in." A woman in her 40s with perfectly coiffed hair and designer sunglasses glared at Charlie. "Great, just great." Charlie's chest tightened. He tried to focus on the items in front of him, his fingers fumbling slightly as he scanned a loaf of bread. "What's the holdup?" she snapped. "Do you need me to do it for you?" I'm sorry, Mom," Charlie stammered, his voice catching on the apology. The woman scoffed, loud enough for those in the line to hear. "Unbelievable. They hire anyone these days, don't they?" A few chuckles from the line behind her only added to Charlie's humiliation. His cheeks burned as he struggled to get the words out. Pea paper or... "Oh, forget it," she cut him off, grabbing the plastic bag herself. "I don't have time for this." As she stormed off, Charlie bit the inside of his cheek, his hands trembling. He could feel the stares of the other customers, the weight of their judgment pressing down on him. "Next," he murmured, barely audible. "Excuse me," a calm, familiar voice said as the next customer stepped up. Charlie looked up and froze. It was him. Tom Hanks, standing at the register with a warm smile, holding a modest basket of groceries. Charlie's throat went dry. He tried to greet him but couldn't seem to find his voice. Tom, noticing the young man's nervousness, leaned in slightly. "Take your time, son," he said, his tone gentle. Charlie managed to nod, his hands shaking as he scanned the items: a carton of eggs, a loaf of bread, some fresh produce. Tom didn't seem to mind the awkward silence, his demeanor relaxed and patient. Then, just as Charlie finished scanning the last item, the woman from earlier returned. Her voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Hey, I think you overcharged me," she snapped, waving a receipt in Charlie's face. Charlie's mouth opened, but before he could respond, the woman turned to Tom and gasped. "Oh my gosh, it's you, Tom Hanks. What are you doing here?" Tom's smile didn't waver. "Just picking up some groceries." "Well, you're a lot more patient than me," she said, laughing obnoxiously. "I don't know how you put up with this kid. He's so slow." The words hung in the air like a slap. Charlie's eyes dropped to the floor, his face hot with shame. But before he could retreat further into himself, Tom spoke up. "I think he's doing a great job," Tom said firmly. The warmth in his voice was gone, replaced by quiet authority. "Everyone has something they're working through. Maybe a little kindness wouldn't hurt." The woman blinked, startled by his response. "Well, I didn't mean." "You did," Tom interrupted, his voice calm but unyielding. "And I think an apology is in order." The line grew silent. All eyes were on the woman, who fidgeted uncomfortably before muttering, "Sorry," in Charlie's direction. Charlie glanced up, his eyes meeting Tom's. There was something in the actor's expression, encouragement, understanding that made his chest feel lighter. He managed a small, grateful nod. As Tom paid for his groceries and left with a friendly wave, the air around Charlie seemed to shift. Customers who had once looked at him with impatience now seemed uncertain, their gazes softer. For the first time in what felt like forever, Charlie stood a little taller behind the register. The world hadn't changed, not really, but for Charlie, something profound had shifted. The encounter with Tom Hanks reverberated through the store like an electric current. Word spread quickly among the staff, and by the end of the day, everyone was talking about how the Hollywood star had stood up for Charlie. Even Greg seemed slightly more subdued, though he still barked orders at the team. As for Charlie, he couldn't stop replaying the moment in his mind. Every detail of Tom's words, the firmness in his voice, the look in his eyes, it all stayed with him. It wasn't just the celebrity factor, it was the way Tom had made him feel seen, as if his struggles mattered. For the first time in a long time, Charlie felt a flicker of pride. The following days at work felt different. Customers who had previously treated Charlie with disdain now smiled at him, offering polite greetings or making small talk. It wasn't perfect, there were still impatient glares and a few rude remarks, but the overwhelming hostility had dimmed. "Hey Charlie," Clara said one afternoon as she finished bagging groceries at the next register. "I saw the video." Charlie blinked, confused. Video. She pulled out her phone and showed him. Someone had filmed the interaction with Tom Hanks and posted it online. The video had already gone viral, with thousands of views and comments pouring in. "Look at this," Clara said, scrolling through the comments. "What a class act. Tom Hanks is a legend, and this one, kudos to the cashier for handling it so well. That's you, Charlie." Charlie stared at the screen, his heart pounding. The idea of so many people watching him, talking about him, made him both nervous and oddly hopeful. Was this what it felt like to be acknowledged? Encouraged by the support, Charlie decided to take a small but significant step. After his shift one evening, he stopped by the community center and signed up for a public speaking group. It was a decision he'd considered for years but had never had the courage to act on. Now, bolstered by Tom's words and the kindness of strangers, he felt ready to try. The group met in a cozy room filled with mismatched chairs and a faint smell of coffee. The facilitator, a cheerful woman named Denise, welcomed Charlie warmly and introduced him to the others. Everyone shared their reasons for joining: overcoming anxiety, preparing for job interviews, gaining confidence. When it was Charlie's turn, his voice wavered, and his stutter crept in, but he managed to explain why he was there. I want to be more confident," he said, his hands gripping the edge of his chair. The group responded with nods of encouragement and applause, and for the first time, Charlie didn't feel embarrassed by his stutter. Instead, he felt accepted. Back at work, Charlie's newfound confidence began to show. It was subtle at first: a little more eye contact with customers, a steadier tone when greeting them. Clara noticed and gave him a thumbs up one day, saying, "Look at you, Charlie. You're on fire." But not everyone was supportive. Greg remained critical, often nitpicking Charlie's work. "Don't let that celebrity nonsense get to your head," he muttered one day. "You're still just a cashier." Charlie didn't respond. He didn't need to. For the first time, Greg's words didn't sink into his skin like barbs. They rolled off him, replaced by a quiet determination to keep growing. One afternoon, as Charlie was bagging groceries for an elderly woman, a man in line behind her struck up a conversation. "You're the guy from that video, right?" the man asked. Charlie nodded, his face heating up. "Why, yes, sir." "Good for you," the man said. "Takes guts to keep going in the face of all that. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The elderly woman patted Charlie's hand gently. "You're doing just fine, dear," she said with a kind smile. These small moments of kindness began to outweigh the negativity that had once dominated Charlie's days. They weren't just compliments, they were affirmations that he had value, that he belonged. At the end of the week, Charlie sat at his desk, flipping through his notebook filled with speech exercises. He practiced aloud, his voice stronger than it had been in years. "Paper or plastic," he said, steady and clear. The words that had once felt like a mountain to climb now came more easily. He wasn't perfect, his stutter still showed up from time to time, but it no longer defined him. For the first time, Charlie began to see his stutter not as a flaw, but as part of who he was. He closed the notebook and looked at the small stack of public speaking group flyers he'd picked up to share with anyone else who might need them. Tomorrow, he thought, tomorrow I'll start giving these out. As he turned off the light and prepared for bed, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time, Charlie felt like he was walking towards something instead of away from it. It started as an ordinary Saturday morning at the supermarket. The aisles were buzzing with the usual weekend rush: parents shopping with their kids, couples debating brands of cereal, and a steady stream of customers pushing their way through crowded lines. Charlie arrived early, his apron neatly tied and his name tag polished. Though nerves still fluttered in his chest when he thought about facing the endless line of customers, a quiet confidence had begun to take root within him. Clara waved at him from Register 3 as he clocked in. "Morning, Charlie. Ready for another day?" He smiled, nodding. Morning, Clara." Greg, as usual, was less cheerful. "Stay sharp, Charlie," he said as Charlie passed him. "This place gets crazy on Saturdays and we can't afford mistakes." Charlie didn't respond. Greg's constant grumbling had lost its sting in the past few days. Instead, he focused on his register, determined to keep the calm he'd been cultivating. Around noon, the store hit its peak. Every register had a line stretching halfway down the aisles, and the hum of voices mixed with the clatter of carts and the rhythmic beep of scanning items. Charlie worked diligently, his movements smooth and efficient. Customers were beginning to recognize him from the viral video, and a few even offered kind words as they paid for their groceries. "You're that cashier," right, a woman said as she handed him her credit card. "The one Tom Hanks stood up for." Charlie nodded, his cheeks flushing. "Why, yes, ma am." "Well, good for you," she said with a smile. "You've got a lot of courage." The words warmed him, but the calm didn't last long. As the lunch hour crept closer, a new tension began to build. It started with the man in the blue baseball cap. He was tall, with broad shoulders and an impatient scowl that darkened as he moved through the line. When it was his turn, he slammed a six-pack of soda and a bag of chips onto the counter, tapping his fingers on the conveyor belt. "Hurry it up," he muttered as Charlie began scanning the items. Charlie swallowed hard, keeping his focus on the task. Did you want a bag for?" "Spit it out," the man barked, his voice echoing above the noise of the store. "God, is it that hard to talk?" The comment cut through Charlie's composure like a knife. Nearby customers turned to look, their expressions ranging from shock to discomfort. Clara froze at her register, her hands hovering over the scanner as she glanced toward Charlie with concern. "I'm sorry," Charlie stammered, his face flushing. He fumbled with the bag, his hands trembling as he tried to place the soda inside. "Sorry doesn't cut it," the man snapped. "Why do they even let someone like you work here? You can't even get a sentence out without choking on it." Charlie's heart pounded in his chest, and for a moment he felt the familiar urge to shrink away, to let the moment pass without confrontation. But then he remembered the words Tom Hanks had said just days ago: everyone has something they're working through. Maybe a little kindness wouldn't hurt. He took a deep breath, steadying his hands on the counter. "Yes, sir," he began, his voice shaking but determined. I'm doing my best." The man snorted, clearly unimpressed. "Your best isn't good enough." At that moment, Clara stepped forward. "Hey," she said sharply, her voice cutting through the tension. "Back off. He's doing his job." The man turned toward her, his face twisting with irritation. "Mind your own business." "This is my business," Clara shot back, her voice unwavering. "And if you keep talking to him like that, I'll call the manager." The commotion caught Greg's attention, and he stormed over, his expression a mix of annoyance and confusion. "What's going on here?" Before Clara could answer, a voice from the back of the line spoke up. "That guy's being a jerk," a middle-aged woman said, pointing at the man in the baseball cap. "He's been yelling at this cashier for no reason." The murmurs of agreement from other customers grew louder, and the man in the cap looked around, suddenly aware of the growing attention on him. "I'm not yelling," he said defensively. "I just think if you're going to work in customer service, you should be able to do the job." "And he is doing the job," Clara said firmly. "Better than most people I know." Greg hesitated, glancing between the man and the crowd of customers. For a moment, it seemed like he might side with the angry customer, but the weight of the room's disapproval seemed to shift his decision. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice and treat my employee with respect," Greg said, his tone reluctant but authoritative. "If you can't do that, I'll have to ask you to leave." The man glared at Greg, then at Charlie, before scoffing loudly. "Unbelievable," he muttered, grabbing his bag and storming out of the store. As the door swung shut behind him, a wave of relief washed over Charlie. The tension in his shoulders eased, and he let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The customers in line began clapping, a few of them even cheering. Clara gave Charlie a quick thumbs up before returning to her register. Greg turned to Charlie, his expression softening just slightly. "Good work, Charlie," he said, his tone uncharacteristically neutral. "Take a 5-minute break if you need it." Charlie nodded, too stunned to respond. He stepped away from the register and headed to the break room, his heart still pounding. Sitting alone in the break room, Charlie replayed the encounter in his mind. For so long, he had let moments like this define him, sinking under the weight of humiliation and self-doubt. But today was different. Today he had stood his ground and others had stood with him. He glanced at the flyer for the public speaking group in his bag, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Maybe it was time to take another step forward. As he returned to his register, a customer approached, an older man with kind eyes. "You handled that well," the man said. "It takes a lot of courage to stand up for yourself like that." "Thank you," Charlie replied, his voice steadier than before. The man nodded, smiling warmly. "Don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough." The rest of the day passed without incident. But the shift marked a turning point for Charlie. He began to notice small changes in the way people treated him, from coworkers to customers. The support he received gave him a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in years. That evening, as he walked home, Charlie looked up at the sky, the fading light painting the clouds in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was heading towards something brighter, something worth fighting for. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, but Charlie knew he had the strength to face them, and he wasn't facing them alone. The days following the confrontation at the supermarket felt like a blur to Charlie. Word of the incident spread quickly, thanks to the growing attention surrounding the viral video of Tom Hanks. Customers who had witnessed the argument in person shared their accounts on social media, many praising Charlie's composure and courage. For someone who had spent most of his life blending into the background, the sudden spotlight felt surreal. At first, Charlie wasn't sure how to handle the attention. Strangers began recognizing him outside the store, offering kind words or even stopping to chat. Some shared their own stories of overcoming personal challenges, while others simply thanked him for inspiring them. The support was overwhelming, but in a good way. For the first time, Charlie felt like his voice mattered, even if it wasn't always perfect. One afternoon, Clara caught up with him during their break. She plopped down in the chair across from him, holding a can of soda and a grin. "You're a bit of a celebrity now," she teased, nudging his foot with hers. Charlie chuckled softly, his cheeks turning pink. It's a lot to take in." "Well, you deserve it," Clara said, her tone sincere. "What you did the other day, that took guts. I couldn't be prouder of you." Charlie met her gaze, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Thank you, Clara. F for standing up, F for me." Clara waved her hand dismissively. "Please, I didn't do much. You handled that guy like a champ. And honestly, it made Greg actually act like a decent human being for once, so I'd call that a win." The two shared a laugh, and for the first time in years, Charlie felt a sense of camaraderie he hadn't known he was missing. Meanwhile, the store manager, Greg, had also undergone a subtle shift in behavior. Though still gruff and critical at times, he seemed to make an effort to be more supportive of Charlie. On one particularly busy afternoon, Greg approached Charlie with a rare smile. "Hey, Charlie," he said, clearing his throat awkwardly. "I've been thinking, you've been doing really well lately, and I wanted to say, good job." Charlie blinked, taken aback. "Thank you, sir." Greg nodded stiffly, then added, "Keep it up." It wasn't much, but coming from Greg, it felt monumental. Charlie tucked the compliment away like a prized keepsake, using it as fuel to keep pushing forward. Outside of work, Charlie continued attending the public speaking group. Each session brought new challenges, but also new victories. With every practice speech, he felt a little more confident, a little more confident. The other group members cheered him on, offering constructive feedback and words of encouragement. One evening, Denise, the facilitator, pulled him aside after the meeting. "Charlie, I just want to say how proud I am of the progress you've made. You're an inspiration to everyone in this group." Charlie's chest swelled with pride. Thank you," he said, his voice steadier than usual. This group has helped me more than I can say." Denise smiled warmly. "You're not just finding your voice, Charlie, you're using it to make a difference." The viral video also brought unexpected opportunities. A local news station reached out, asking to interview Charlie about his experience. Though the idea of speaking on camera terrified him, he decided to accept. It was another step toward conquering his fears, and he didn't want to shy away from it. The interview took place in a small studio with bright lights and a friendly reporter named Sarah. She asked him about the incident with Tom Hanks, the confrontation at the store, and his journey towards self-confidence. Sarah said, her tone warm and encouraging, "What message would you like to share with others who might be struggling with similar challenges?" Charlie took a deep breath, his heart pounding. He glanced at the cue cards in his lap, then looked directly into the camera. I want them to know that it's okay to struggle, he said, his stutter soft but present. We all have challenges, but we don't have to face them alone. And sometimes the biggest step is just trying. Sarah smiled, nodding. That's a beautiful message, Charlie. Thank you for sharing your story. The interview aired later that week, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Messages poured in from people all over the city, and even beyond, thanking Charlie for his bravery and resilience. At work, the environment continued to improve. Clara had become one of Charlie's closest allies, always ready with a joke or a kind word when he needed it most. Even Greg seemed to mellow out, occasionally stepping in to handle difficult customers before they could reach Charlie's register. One day, as Charlie was finishing his shift, a young boy approached him. The boy, no older than 10, had bright blue eyes and a shy smile. His mother stood nearby, watching with a mixture of pride and encouragement. "Hi," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have a stutter, too." Charlie crouched down to the boy's level, offering him a kind smile. "Why you do?" The boy nodded, his hands fidgeting nervously. "But you're really brave. I saw the video. I want to be like you." Charlie's heart swelled. He placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "Why, you're already brave, buddy. Just keep being yourself." The boy grinned, his nervousness melting away. "Thanks." As the boy and his mother left, Charlie felt a deep sense of fulfillment. It wasn't just about overcoming his own struggles anymore, it was about showing others that they could, too. That evening, as Charlie walked home, he reflected on how far he'd come. The world hadn't magically become perfect, and he still had moments of doubt and fear. But he was no longer defined by his stutter or the cruel words of others. He had found his voice, and with it, a strength he never knew he possessed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Charlie allowed himself a small smile. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but for the first time he felt ready to face them head-on. The supermarket buzzed with its usual energy as customers filed in and out, carts rattling and voices mixing in the air. For Charlie, the atmosphere felt lighter than it had in a long time. He stood at his register, calmly scanning items and greeting customers with a quiet but steady confidence. The days of shrinking under scrutiny felt like a distant memory. "Hey Charlie," Clara called from a nearby register, "you've got a visitor." Charlie glanced up and saw a familiar figure walking toward him. His breath caught in his chest as Tom Hanks, casual and unassuming in a baseball cap and jeans, approached with a warm smile. Charlie couldn't believe it. The actor waved lightly as he stepped into Charlie's line. "Long time no see," Tom said, placing a small basket of groceries on the counter. Charlie smiled, his heart racing but his hands steady. "Hi," he managed, his voice carrying just the faintest tremor. Tom tilted his head, studying Charlie. "You look good," he said. "Different. More confident." "Thank you," Charlie replied, his cheeks warming. "Yeah, you helped W with that." Tom's smile widened. "I've been keeping up with you," he said, leaning slightly on the counter. "That video, the news interviews, you've inspired a lot of people, Charlie. Myself included." The words hit Charlie with a wave of emotion. He paused, taking a deep breath before responding. It means a lot, coming from YU." Tom nodded, pulling out his wallet to pay. "You've done the hard work. You faced challenges and didn't back down. That's something to be proud of." As Charlie handed him his receipt, Tom hesitated for a moment, then extended his hand. Charlie shook it firmly, a sense of gratitude and respect passing between them. "Keep going," Tom said, his tone gentle but firm. "You're doing great things." After Tom left, the rest of Charlie's shift passed in a blur. The moment felt surreal, but it was also a reminder of how far he had come. When the day finally ended, Charlie walked home under the golden glow of the setting sun, his steps lighter than ever. At his small apartment, he sat at his desk, the same spot where he'd spent countless nights practicing his speech exercises. But tonight, he wasn't just practicing for himself. He was preparing for something bigger. The community center was bustling with activity when Charlie arrived for his public speaking group's special event. Tonight, he would be giving his first full-length speech to an audience of family, friends, and community members. Denise greeted him at the door with a reassuring smile. "Nervous?" she asked. Charlie nodded, his palms damp with sweat. "A little." "That's a good thing," Denise said. "It means you care." As the event began, Charlie sat in the front row, listening to others share their stories. Each speaker brought their own unique perspective, their own struggles and triumphs. By the time Charlie's name was called, his nerves had settled into a steady hum of anticipation. He walked to the podium, the weight of the audience's eyes on him. The microphone felt cool in his hand as he adjusted it slightly. He looked out into the crowd and saw familiar faces: Clara, Denise, his mother, even Greg, who sat awkwardly in the back row. The sight filled him with a surprising sense of comfort. Charlie took a deep breath, then began. When I was a kid, I hated T talking," he said, his voice shaky but clear. My stutter made every word feel like a B battle." He paused, scanning the room. The audience was silent, their attention rapt. "I spent years trying to hide from it, trying to blend in. But I learned something important: you can't hide forever." Charlie's voice grew steadier as he continued, the words flowing more naturally. He spoke about the challenges he'd faced, the moments that had brought him to his lowest, and the people who had helped him rise again. He talked about Tom Hanks, the public speaking group, and the kindness of strangers who had made him believe in himself. Everyone has their struggles," he said, his gaze sweeping the room. But we don't have to face them alone. We all have a V voice, even if it takes time to find it." When he finished, the room erupted into applause. Charlie's heart swelled as he stepped away from the podium, tears prickling his eyes. For the first time, he felt not just heard, but understood. The weeks that followed were filled with new opportunities. Charlie began volunteering at the community center, helping others who struggled with public speaking. He even started mentoring a young boy with a stutter, the same boy who had approached him at the supermarket. Watching the boy gain confidence felt like a full-circle moment, a reminder of how far he'd come. At work, Charlie's relationships continued to improve. Clara remained a steadfast friend, and even Greg showed a newfound respect for him, offering occasional nods of approval. Customers still recognized him from the viral video, but now the attention felt less overwhelming and more like a badge of honor. One evening, as Charlie prepared for bed, he glanced at the notebook on his desk. The pages were filled with practice sentences, crossed-out lines, and scribbled notes. It was a testament to his journey, a physical reminder of the battles he'd fought and won. He picked up the notebook, flipping through the pages one last time before closing it. Then, with a smile, he placed it on the shelf, a symbol of the chapter he was ready to leave behind. Charlie lay down, the sounds of the city humming softly outside his window. His journey wasn't over. There would still be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt, but now he faced the future with a quiet confidence, knowing that he had the strength to overcome whatever came his way. As he drifted off to sleep, one thought lingered in his mind: this is just the beginning.